Tenemos hoy el enorme placer de recibir en la Facultad de Derecho, Empresa y Gobierno de la Universidad Francisco de Vitoria a Danilo Türk, que es actual presidente del Club de Madrid, que ha sido presidente de Eslovenia durante los años 2007 al 2012, que es profesor de Derecho Internacional, experto en Derechos Humanos, diplomático, que ha sido antiguo subsecretario general de Asuntos Políticos de Naciones Unidas. Antes de ocupar el puesto de presidente, su país desarrolló una carrera exitosa en el seno de las Naciones Unidas. Fue el primer representante permanente de su país ante esa institución en Nueva York. Representó a Eslovenia en el Consejo de Seguridad entre los años 1998 y 2000 y fue subsecretario general de Asuntos Políticos entre el año 2000 y 2005, entre muchos otros cargos. Como decía al principio, en el año 2007 se convirtió en candidato al puesto de presidente de la República de Eslovenia. Ganó las elecciones sin ser miembro de ningún partido político. Fue nominado por una lista de ciudadanos, apoyada a su vez por varios partidos políticos. Tras la conclusión de su mandato a finales de 2012, dedicó su tiempo a labores humanitarias, a la enseñanza en la universidad y a la cooperación internacional, y de manera muy particular a proyectos desarrollados en el seno del Club de Madrid. President Türk, it is a pleasure to have you here at the university. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us in your busy agenda.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I should say that as a professor of international law, I am very much aware of the contribution of Francisco de Vitoria to the evolution of international law and legal thinking in general about certain basic concepts which still determine our discussion and evolution of law, such as human dignity, such as freedom of commerce and others. So I'm very pleased to be here at this important university.
I'm so glad to hear you saying that, since we take so seriously the figure of Francisco de Vitoria and we try to follow on his steps, to try to think about this second globalization, if you can describe it in that way, taking into account that the School of Salamanca really thought through carefully the first globalization and developed very innovative solutions in the legal realm, but also in the political and the business and economic realm to deal with the challenges of that era. Now we try modestly to do the same for this new, or for this second globalization. Now, I want to focus in the first question on your broad experience in the political context, but also in the academic context. And with that in mind, when we look at globalization and all the huge systemic crises that are interconnected, we feel, I think, citizenship. We all us feel the need for leaders that have a real call for public service, but also that have the capacity to actually execute wise decisions in contexts in which information is very limited, time is of the essence, and so on and so forth. So, what would you consider are the key aspects that should be either incorporated or reinforced in the training of future political and social leaders? Things that, in the light of your experience and the world we are in, you think are essential to focus on to generate that kind of leader?
Well, I think that certain qualities are timeless. And I think that one can come again back to Francisco de Vitoria, actually. You see, I was involved in human rights movement in 1980s, and one of the themes of that time was, of course, human rights of indigenous peoples. And everybody in our, how should I say, community was quoting Francisco de Vitoria, the Indies, the inherent human dignity. And I think that that's pretty timeless. The question is how it is applied. Obviously, when it comes to indigenous peoples, the application of that basic concept and basic value was not adequate. And the challenge for human rights movement and political leaders was how to make it effective, how to develop policies that give the necessary and fair treatment to human dignity. And I believe that that's very basic for the future, the second wave of globalization. The first wave of globalization was really about global commerce, liberalization of economic flows, trade flows, financial flows, and so forth. Now we are confronted with the flows of migrants. which is to a large extent the consequence of the previous period of globalization. And the question is, do we understand what the requirement of human dignity requires today in our circumstances? And I think that that's the first question the political leaders of today have to answer. I don't believe that a simple answer is possible to say we will just close borders and then we'll have no problem, or that we'll open the border completely and we will have no problem. We have to figure out practical solutions which are based on this basic Franciscan idea of human dignity. And of course, political leaders have to have appropriate experience for that. They have to have the experience of practical solutions. That's another requirement. And they have to be very open-minded, because the future is not going to look like the past. And experience should not be seen as a prescription. Experience is something you need to know to be sure that you don't make mistakes. But other than that, it's not enough. You have to be open-minded, open to science, open to opportunities that are showed by science, and then figure out appropriate normative and practical political solutions.
That's, one would say that is obvious, but I resist that classification, because indeed coming back to the past to realize that human dignity has to be at the core and has to inform everything, I would say is pretty revolutionary in our world that is so technological, so complex, where decisions have to be taken so quick that sometimes it's not difficult to forget the human dimension of policy.
But look, I mean, this was a problem in all periods. I mean, this practical manifestation of this problem were different. During the immediate post-industrial revolution period, obviously the brutal exploitation of the working class was the constraint, was the encroachment on human dignity. And that gave rise to Karl Marx and his theories. That is largely a matter of the past now. I mean, the dangers today are different from what they were in the 19th century. Now, 20th century brought very important, very serious problems relating to warfare, to industrialized death, which was a huge encroachment on human dignity in every respect, not only in terms of actual killing of people, but all kinds of suffering that this scourge produced. And now we are confronted with a technological evolution which is so fast that we don't know if the humankind and structures that the world has created can manage them. And then again, they threaten human dignity. So one has to start with human dignity and figure out, all right, what do we do to make sure that technology doesn't eat us up?
You know, at this university, we are trying to find the common foundations, not denominator, of all the scientific disciplines. And one of the foundations that all share, or should share, is a strong concept of human dignity, of the person, an anthropological foundation, which leads to the question of the role of philosophy in the university systems, in the curricula, but also obviously in secondary education. My question nonetheless is very practical here. You are a professor of international law, you have had this political experience. What set of recommendations, or if that's too strong, what reflections or comments would you have on the practical role of universities to imbue students with the capacity to become leaders in their context right after they leave university? What are universities lacking? What they could do, or what best practice have you seen so that universities can really be loyal to their central identity, so to speak?
Well, look, university is not only about skills. I mean, university has to teach certain skills, and it's important that universities rely on experimentation skills, that they provide opportunity for skillful management of different disciplines, different areas of work for the young people in the future. Now we are meeting in a studio which looks very much like a professional TV studio. So I think the skills that people obtain here are quite important, and I believe believe that that applies in various ways to other disciplines, other faculties within the university. In law, you can have moot courts. In business, you can have various business practices, in medicine, and so forth. So skills are one thing, but they are not enough. What I think is most important and what makes university vital for the future is ethics. Because every discipline has an ethical base. And ethical base has to do with what we discussed before, human dignity, and how does one ensure protection of human dignity through the discipline itself, and what does the discipline have to take into account to be sufficiently not only protective, but also to advance the idea of human dignity further. In science, that of course is very important. In informatics today, in artificial intelligence, everywhere you would see the need to create a strong, or understand a strong ethical base for what is done. And then obviously, if the information technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all these new technological developments go further without the managers of that development being aware of the ethical base of what they are doing, then of course the world will be in trouble. And that's one of the main challenges today, and the university has to be able to imbue, as you said, young people with the ethical arsenal, so to speak, which is not too difficult to find. We find it in Aristotle, we find it in Christian ethics, we find it in ethical sources in other ethical and religious systems of the world. It is possible, it is doable, but it is important that university gives young people not only skills but also this ethical dimension.
Thank you so much, President, for your contribution to the university, also to politics, and for being, I would say, a source of inspiration for many future leaders. I very much hope that those that are pursuing or thinking in pursuing a political career pay heed to your words and to your reflections, and certainly I hope that we will have the chance to cooperate in the future. Thank you so much for the time you have spent with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.